Tonight, another takedown of an unidentified unmanned flying object, this one targeted by a missile over the Great Lakes. Canada-U.S. security forces on high alert.
Whatever this is, they are not subtle, so I would begin to worry a little bit.
The order to shoot down as NORAD ramps up policing the skies. Humanitarian tragedy, family grief. Rescue missions turn to recovery in the earthquake zone. Plus, a mayor's silence in the aftermath of scandal.
He phoned us and said, I think it's going to make too many people uncomfortable.
John Tory keeps a low profile at a lying in state for another former mayor.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. 3 high-flying objects shot down in just 3 days. The latest this afternoon, taken out by the U.S. Air Force as the unidentified object hovered over Lake Huron within American airspace, but near the Canadian border. The object was tracked over Montana last night and followed by radar as it moved across Wisconsin, Michigan, and Lake Huron. CTV's Calvin Gallagher now on this and the joint U.S.-Canada operation underway to recover whatever it was that was decommissioned yesterday over Yukon.
U.S. and Canadian fighter jets scrambled again this afternoon, this time to intercept an octagonal object over Lake Huron. A U.S. missile brought it down on the American side of the border, but Canadian airspace was closed near Tobermory, Ontario, as a precaution. U.S. officials believe it's the same object tracked over Montana last night.
Now that NORAD has the ability to detect and track these assets more, they're finding them more and they're taking action.
Defense Minister Anita Anand says NORAD launched Canadian and U.S. aircraft to investigate the object before it was taken down in U.S. airspace by a U.S. aircraft. It's the third consecutive day an American jet has shot down a high-altitude threat. Just yesterday, NORAD tracked a cylindrical object 12,000 meters above the Yukon Territory. A U.S. F-22 fighter jet shot it down. Now the FBI and RCMP are searching the remote area to recover the remnants and analyze it.
It represented a reasonable threat to civilian aircraft, so I gave the order to take it down.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau left for a planned visit to Yukon today, which now takes on a different importance.
This evening I'll be sitting down with Indigenous leaders, including those from the areas potentially affected by the shootdown.
Canadian officials have been tight-lipped as to where these flying objects came from, but their appearance comes after a suspected Chinese spy balloon was shot down last week.
I would be worried. I think if this is indeed the Chinese, they are being far more aggressive than they usually are.
And how often these unidentified objects have flown over Canadian soil is still unknown, prompting calls to upgrade NORAD's detection equipment. Sandy?
All right, Kevin in Ottawa, thank you. With all eyes on the skies, there are growing questions about who is behind the objects and how much of a threat they really pose. CTV's Richard Madden takes a closer look.
Mr. President, do you know who sent the object?
This afternoon, President Joe Biden gave the orders for the U.S. military to destroy that mysterious object flying over Lake Huron. The Pentagon deemed it a threat due to the potential surveillance capabilities, adding it flew too close to sensitive U.S. military sites. Michigan Democrat Alyssa Slotkin now calling for transparency. We're all interested in exactly what this object was and its purpose.
Whoa, they shot at it.
This latest strike comes just 8 days after fighter jets shot down that Chinese spy balloon off the East Coast. The Pentagon and White House releasing few, if any, details about the objects and their capabilities.
In the absence of information, people's anxiety leads them into potentially destructive areas. So I do hope that very soon the administration has a lot more information for all of us on what's going on.
U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer, who receives intelligence briefings, says the two objects shot down over Alaska and Yukon were apparently balloons and much smaller than the one from China.
Both of those, one over Canada, one over Alaska, were at 40,000 feet. Immediately it was determined that that's a danger to commercial aircraft, which also fly at 40,000 feet.
And that Chinese balloon is carefully being pieced back together.
mean, the very scale of this balloon and of the technology that was deployed by China in spying on the United States is unprecedented. No other nation has anything like it, and no other nation's attempted it.
Now, U.S. intelligence is expected to brief lawmakers this week, but the big question, are these mysterious objects a new threat or just improved tracking by radar? Either way, the U.S. government and NORAD appear to be ramping up how it polices the skies. Sandy.
All right. Thank you, Richard, in Washington. Toronto Mayor John Tory came out of hiding today, ignoring cameras and remaining silent after the uproar over his admission of an affair with a subordinate and his subsequent resignation. Tory was at Mississauga City Hall paying his respects to one of Canada's longest-serving mayors, Hazel McCallion, as she lies in state until her Valentine's Day funeral. Although Tory's resignation isn't final yet, the race is on to replace him in Toronto's top job. CTV's Andrew Brennan has more.
There was barely a whisper as many stood and watched John Tory walk past the cameras and towards the casket of former Mississauga Mayor Hazel McCallion. Tory today confirming that he will no longer be speaking at McCallion's funeral this Tuesday, but will still attend.
He phoned us and said, I think it's going to make too many people uncomfortable.
His surprise resignation now casts a shadow on City Hall with a crucial budget that he prepared set to be debated later this week.
We'll see in the coming days what the transition looks like. He still, as of right now, is the mayor of Toronto, and council has to formally receive that resignation.
While Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey takes over for the interim, the race is on for his replacement, and it will be costly.
That's a major task, a by-election across a city of 3 million people. It's expensive, not similar to a by-election that you would see for a federal or provincial riding.
Jennifer Keesmaat, who lost to Tory in 2018, confirmed she won't be running again, but Toronto and its people have a chance now, she says, to choose a different path.
This incident is what it is. Who we are as a city is something that we now get an opportunity to redefine.
An opportunity, political analysts say, can go in a new direction with a new mayor in dealing with the rise in violence on public transit, crime, and mounting concerns over homelessness. Sandy.
Andrew, thank you. Under threat of legal action by Canada Soccer, the national women's team has returned to training in Florida. The reigning Olympic champions were striking over funding cuts and pay equity issues, but hit the pitch today in protest. National team player Quinn tweeting, "We're being forced back," and claiming Soccer Canada upholds gender inequality. Well, TSN's Rick Westhead has been following this story very closely. Rick, talk to us about what's at the heart of the unrest.
Well, really, there's three major topics. The first is pay equity. The second are the dramatic budget cuts that Canada Soccer has announced to the national programs, both men's and women's, and also transparency. In the case of the women's national program, we're talking about cuts that are going to affect the number of national team training camps that they can have this year, which is the Women's World Cup year. Again, the Women's World Cup will be in July and August in New Zealand and Australia. And we're also talking about transparency. One of the things that the women's team players have asked for is we want to see what the men's team's budget was last year in 2022 leading into their World Cup and give us the same amount of money for our World Cup year. To this point, Canada Soccer has not been willing to be transparent about that.
So is this something that could potentially escalate to involve the Minister for Sport and public funding at issue?
Well, I think so. Again, the players are obviously very upset. They returned to training today. Some players wore their training kits inside out. Others blacked out the Canada Soccer logos before they took the field. We know that the minister has the ability to look at how government funding to Canada Soccer is used, and some of that funding has been earmarked for women's sport. So has that money actually gone to that purpose? Also, we've got Anthony Housefather, a Liberal MP, who wrote on social media that he would like to see potentially hearings and testimony involving Canada Soccer. And again, Mr. Housefather is on the Heritage Committee, and if that sounds familiar, it's because that Heritage Committee also last year called Hockey Canada officials, and we all know how that went.
Right. Okay. TSN's Rick Westhead. Thank you, Rick, as always. There are few rivalries in this country more intense than the one between the Edmonton Oilers and Calgary Flames. But that Battle of Alberta has turned to controversy over hints provincial money may be used to help Calgary build a new NHL arena after Edmonton had to go it alone. Critics accuse Premier Danielle Smith of picking sides and rooting unfairly for her home team. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier reports.
As Canada's oldest NHL arena still in use, Calgary's Saddle Dome is in desperate need of replacement. But there are questions over who will pay.
Let me just start with some opening remarks.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has suggested the province could play a role several times, including Thursday.
And if we can be helpful in some way, I've said that we would like to be helpful.
Then again during her Saturday radio show, where she hinted the fate of the team could be at stake.
I do not want to see the Quebec Flames, I can tell you that much. So we've got to make sure that we do what we can to keep that team here.
Though the Premier hasn't specified that provincial money is on the table, Calgary's mayor has said she believes that is the case.
I would assume there would have to be, otherwise I don't know why we would have a liaison with the province.
In 2016, Edmonton opened its new NHL arena with no provincial funding, so the prospect of help for Calgary is considered offside in the Alberta capital.
I think Calgary needs to come up with their own funding to build the arena themselves. I mean, we had to, they should too.
It's just not appropriate for it to be taxpayer dollar.
During Edmonton's negotiations, Smith, then the opposition leader, was one of the loudest voices against public funding.
I think that you would find that people are reluctant to support a proposal where middle-class taxpayers see a portion of their dollars that would go to support franchises where you do have, let's face it, millionaire players and billionaire owners.
The flip-flop, pure politics, according to this sports economist.
She is facing a provincial election in 3 months. She does have ties to the city of Calgary, so it stands to reason that she would be supportive of this project.
Premier Smith says she can't say much about arena negotiations because of a non-disclosure agreement, but she did tell reporters at this point the province has received no formal requests. Sandy.
CTV's Bill Fortier, thank you. Well, Canada has a slim connection to the 57th Super Bowl. Zach Collaros, the CFL's most outstanding player twice, was college roommates with the Kelsey brothers, who tonight made Super Bowl history.
But who is going to guard Travis Kelsey inside?
Travis with Kansas City and Jason with Philadelphia are the first siblings to play against each other at a Super Bowl.
As a seam, and Jalen Hurts is in for the touchdown.
They're not the only ones making history tonight. Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes paired up as the first black quarterbacks ever to face off against each other during the big game. And it was Barbados-born superstar Rihanna who rocked her biggest stage since giving birth to a baby last May. And her agent confirmed tonight she's pregnant again. Early reviews called the halftime show a fitting return for one of music's biggest stars.
Short, and the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57.
And ultimately, it was Kansas City that came out on top, 38-35, winning the Lombardi Trophy for the third time in its franchise history. And coming up, incredible stories of survival as hopes fade in an unfolding humanitarian crisis. Plus, a tropical cyclone bears down under. 1 week after two devastating earthquakes rocked Turkey and Syria, the death toll has surpassed 33,000. Turkish officials are now blaming shoddy construction for the collapse of so many buildings, today issuing more than 130 arrest warrants. This property developer was taken into custody at the Istanbul airport, where authorities say he was trying to flee the country. For many who survived the deadly collapses, the future looks bleak, as CTV's Tom Walters reports.
They are lamentations for the lost, for a brother, for the lives and for the life that ceased to exist a week ago. These are members of the Termel family, who now live in a park in Adiyaman. We ask Ismet Termel what things were like before the quake. That's in the past, he says, as if what is gone forever is too painful to think about. The people here are a world away from how they used to live, but not very far from where. Most were here, in a complex of 8 apartment buildings that all collapsed. But even homes that are still standing are now dangerous. We're afraid to go inside to get clothes, Ismet says. The clothes we're wearing now are from Monday. Where are you sleeping? We're sleeping in a car or outside, he says, and it's cold. But they stay here anyway because they are waiting for a member of their family. There is somebody inside the rubble, he says. They worry that bodies with no one to claim them are not being treated properly. No washing, no burial clothes, says Hussein Termel. The Termels are Kurdish Alevis, meaning they face both religious and ethnic discrimination in Turkey. Off camera, some say they think that's why the government was especially slow to respond here in predominantly Kurdish Adıyaman. And while aid is now coming, they don't know how long they can count on it. They expect to be forgotten. We are so alone, says Mahmoud Termel. We have nothing, and we don't know what will happen to us. It is the inescapable question. What are we going to do? But for those who now face months and years of rebuilding their lives, starting with nothing but debris, it's hard to say which is more painful, that they cannot imagine the future, or that they can. Tom Walters, CTV News, Adıyaman, Turkey.
And a powerful tropical cyclone called Gabrielle has Auckland, New Zealand in its sights.
There will be destruction from the cyclone.
Already thousands are without power and roads are closed as heavy rain and winds of 130 kilometers an hour hammer the region. Still ahead, John Paris broke down barriers. Now there's a petition to honor this hockey hero. There's a push underway on Canada's East Coast to induct professional hockey's first black coach into the Hall of Fame. John Paris Jr. spent decades on the ice, first as a player before he broke the color barrier to coach minor hockey. As CTV's Atlantic Bureau Chief Kreesan Ashkate reports, there are a lot of firsts this trailblazing pioneer can claim.
For John Paris Jr., the love for hockey came at an early age. He remembers sitting around the TV to watch the game with his dad, John Sr.
He would ask the questions pertinent to the game or to an individual play or a concept, and then I would answer.
That critical understanding would bring him to elite levels, later trying out for the Montreal Junior Canadiens and then the Chicago Blackhawks farm team, while enduring racism in the mid-1960s.
Dad had always said, if you're accomplishing something, or if you're good at it, you're always going to have someone that will find fault with you.
A sudden diagnosis of Crohn's disease would end his NHL dreams. But Paris Jr. instead shifted to coaching at a time when there were no black coaches.
Because I felt that I still had a responsibility towards the athletes that were surrounding me.
He would become the first black coach in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, the first black scout in the NHL, and would lead the Atlanta Knights to win the International Hockey League Turner Cup in '94. Hockey Nova Scotia has now started a petition to induct Paris Jr. in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
One of the things I think is often overlooked, not only the accolades and not only his accomplishments, but the atmosphere in which he done it in. A time when racism was overt, it was systemic.
Reaching the ranks and accomplishments that he did, there's no question where he belongs.
Paris Jr.'s brother appreciates his recognition, but hoped the hockey decision makers would induct him without the petition.
It would be much, much greater if the powers of hockey were leading the way.
An ongoing push to recognize a man who paved the way for inclusion in Canada's favorite pastime. Kreesan Ashkate, CTV News, Halifax.
After the break, art for when memory fails.
It's been fun getting to know my mom again.
The cartoonist using comics to communicate. We leave you tonight with the value of memories, the importance of preserving them while making more. CTV's Adam Sawatsky has a perfect illustration of that lesson from a mother and her son.
His name is Guilty.
Gareth Godin and his mom Linda are on an unexpected journey.
It's been fun getting to know my mom again.
Their regular rides together include Scottish dialect lessons.
You say it like you're going to spit. Ugh, ugh.
And the occasional salty song about a man's upturned kilt.
You can't help you laughing.
But Linda also forgets Gareth's name and which of her sons he is.
Were you my firstborn?
No, you're second.
Linda, you see, has been diagnosed with dementia, or as she calls it, going doolally.
If you're doolally, you've lost the plot in your head.
Linda was born in Scotland before traveling to Canada by herself as a teenager and starting her own hairdressing business, which she ran for decades.
And watching her come to terms with the idea that she doesn't have the control she once has is heartbreaking.
But then it couldn't have felt more heartwarming when 5-year-old Gareth said he wanted to be a cartoonist when he grew up, and Linda never stopped saying, go for it.
He was good, really good.
The support led Gareth to become a comic book store owner, college art teacher, and creator of an autobiographical comic series he's been producing every day for almost 20 years.
How do you translate something as complicated and life-altering as dementia into an inky cartoon?
Luckily, Gareth and Linda have always shared a common sense of humor.
If something deadly serious happens, all we can do is laugh about it.
So, when Linda mistook a coffee cup holder for a seatbelt clip, or called Beatles Paul and Ringo Steve and Pam, Gareth created a comic.
And we could make each other laugh, which certainly helped soothe the pain.
While Gareth also illustrates the inevitable hard times, Linda's striving to make every moment the best of times.
So I'm quite proud of being doolally because I can do whatever I bloody well want now.
And even when Linda wants to see the mountains and mistakes them for a picture he painted just for her, even when she arrives and can't recall Gareth's name, she never seems to forget how loved he makes her feel.
Magic. Absolute magic. He's just the best. But I'm not going to tell him.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Victoria.
And that is our newscast for this Sunday. Thank you for sharing your weekend with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar Sachedina is here tomorrow. Have a good night. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye for now.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.